Is the church's whole problem that we're afraid to be wrong? I just had this great interview with Matt Whitman, the 10-Minute Bible Hour guy. He's got a great YouTube channel. You should go check it out. And we have a conversation that leads us in this direction that we're kind of a graceless culture right now. And people who want to say this is the truth and there's only one way to see it, maybe there's a reason that's not working. So me and Matt talk through different ways in which we approach scripture and then how people are reacting to that, both people in the church and also all the tens of thousands of people that he's reaching, even millions of views on some of his videos, who aren't from the church, and how they hear the Bible in this lens of, it's okay if I'm wrong about some of these things. All right, stay tuned.
This is the Biblical Mind Podcast, produced by the Center for Hebraic Thought. Honest 5-star reviews help others find this podcast. Visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org for articles and videos that explore the deep structures of Scripture.
There are a few different types of resistances to the Bible that I've encountered on the internet. Template number one is the Christian who had things go wrong in the age of, kind of 90s youth group, which, by the way, I don't want to just smash that. It's really fashionable and to kind of get out our little monocles of knowledge and adjust our smoking jackets and say how much smarter and better we are than the people in the 90s who tried to teach us the Bible and be faithful. They had no idea there was going to be an internet. They had no idea there was going to be social media. Right. They tried to take a thing that was life-giving, that their parents and grandparents gave them, and they tried to give it to you and me. And on balance, I think they did a pretty good job. However, MySpace did happen in 2004, and then an avalanche of social media after that, and then it all ended up on your phone after that, and then it was just game on. Everything changed about how we think about each other, think about religion, think about the Bible, think about what church to go to, think about truth in general. Epistemology has been completely rewritten overnight for the first time in human history. I mean, so stuff's crazy. And as a result, you get these different templates for negative reactions to the Bible when you go and try to talk with people about that on the internet. Number one is something went wrong at church when I was growing up, in the youth group or whatever, and I don't like it, and it makes me feel bad. And the pastor was mean to my parents, or it was boring and I got scolded all the time. It could be anything, right? And then language evolved during the age of social media to sort of give voice to those negative feelings about church. And people are hurt about it. I basically just described my own experience that caused me to walk away from faith completely. It was the Bible that brought me back around. So that's a big part of why I like to do what I like to do. I think the thing makes sense. If you maybe just step back from the hurt and the things that didn't go well in Faith 1.0 build and re-encounter the text, in a thoughtful way, reading it for what it's trying to be, as opposed to what gets inflicted on it sometimes. I think people encounter God there. I think it's really effective. So type number one of resistance is people are hurt by church. I get that. I think that is kind of winding down. People have all sort of en masse gone through that I was hurt by church process. Now we're coming out the other end in the age of authority crisis, and everybody's like, okay, well, I don't really trust politicians anymore. I don't trust advertising anymore. I don't trust athletes anymore. I don't trust entertainment anymore. I don't trust the medical world like I used to. I don't trust the economy and money. I don't trust anything anymore. Okay, what's the first thing I stopped trusting? I should go back to that. Oh, God and the Bible. Let's take another run at church. And I feel like that's kind of the moment that we're in right now. So I run into that kind of resistance to the Bible. I run into the resistance to the Bible that just says, culturally it doesn't mesh well with recent opinions that have become fashionable. But you're a student of history. You know that fashionable opinions seem immutable and timeless when they first catch on and the snowball starts rolling downhill. But every set of fashionable opinions ever have eventually changed.
We just want to be on the right side of history on this one.
That's adorable.
You were a history major, weren't you? Or you studied history?
Yeah.
I remember.
I did. Yeah. Even all of my Bible and church stuff and seminary stuff, it was all angled toward the classical history and history of the church and stuff like that, history of thought. So, but people don't know that, man. People study things where they actually make money and have real jobs. Unlike you and me, we study these super old things, and we have the luxury of learning these lessons. So it became just unfashionable. You used to get light social points for kind of doing vaguely Christian things. Then you started to get light social points for sort of being against it and edgy. And then it became a thing where, like, no, you were going to have to pay a real social price for liking God, the Bible, and church at the height of kind of the age of madness there. And now we're to this place where I don't think anybody knows how anything is. And people who are part of that squishy middle in terms of what they think about God and the Bible and church, now they don't know where to go. No one knows what to do to look cool right now. We're all kind of just floating out there. Yeah. They're all off.
Yeah.
And then there are people who just think the Bible is too hard and that it isn't for them, and that it takes too much academic prowess to get into it, and they're intimidated by it, so they default to a very light devotional therapeutic reading of the whole text because they feel like they can do that, and they have seen modeled that it's important to study the Bible, and they want to. And so I guess what I'm trying to do on the internet is a response to those three main reactions against the Bible.
Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I want to affirm what I know you already do affirm, which is people who were hurt in church. That's a real issue, that you don't just go like, hey man, quit being hurt and look at the facts of the Bible, right? You have to acknowledge, like, okay, yeah, I don't know what to do. Like, I generally don't know what to do with those people outside of say, like, hey, some Christians that aren't like that, right? That's not the whole church. It's a difficult problem, though. The church, I remember, even when I was a kid, I went to church for a couple of years, and I remember a guy, I was wearing a Danzig shirt. You remember Danzig?
Absolutely. Everybody thought he was going to play Wolverine in the 90s, and he never got the gig.
That would make sense, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I see it.
One of the Satanic Panic was all gimmicky and heavy metal, except for Danzig, who might have actually been a real Satanist.
He maybe meant it.
Yeah. When he ripped that chicken in the music video in half, that's when even the camera crew was like, oh, dang.
Seriously, are we actually doing that? Yeah.
But I remember, I went to this church as a kid with my brother, and I was wearing a Danzig shirt. This guy's like, do you think that church glorifies God or not? And I remember looking back at him and going like, well, do you think your polo glorifies God or not? Like, what kind of what are we talking about here, right? And I just remember thinking, these people don't get me. They don't care about me. Later, the guy who was the youth leader confirmed, like, they didn't like the skinhead showing up and smoking in the parking lot and around their nice, cute kids or whatever. So I totally get that. I'm interested in, like, how do you overcome that? Because I know you've told me before about all these people you're talking to who have that background, but they're plenty willing to have a conversation with you. So what do you think you're doing that creates that conversation?
Well, I think they're willing to have a conversation with most people. There are two subcategories to what you're talking about there, though. That's just the truth of the matter. I think even biblically we can say this. There are, I don't know, I guess I'm both subcategories as well. Subcategory number one, genuinely, some stuff at church was hurtful and it made me feel bad, and I'm right and they were wrong and they were mean. Also, sometimes I don't want there to be a God because he tells me what to do, and so I invent slights. I've done this in my relationships. Like, I don't like you. You're intimidating to me. It makes me feel bad when we're together, but you haven't done anything. Oh, wait, I thought of something that I can project. Like, the truth is, I don't think there's a single person in this conversation, in this group we're talking about, who is just 100%, I was hurt, they were all bad, and they were wrong, and they were mean, and my hurt is reflective of the most truthful reading of the situation. I also don't think there's anybody who's 100%, I'm just victim-y and made up a social excuse for why I want to rebel against God. I think we're weird and we're complicated and we're insecure and we're self-conscious. And sometimes hurt is because people were malicious and mean. Sometimes it's because they were dumb. Sometimes it's because we weren't paying attention and didn't read what was going on in the room very well and internalized these deep, abiding hurts that if we could watch that back on video now, we'd be embarrassed because everyone was being cool except me.
Right.
It was totally me.
These are some really deep. I mean, I'm thinking of myself and other people. Like this is I think exactly what's going on. So again, where do you fit into, where has I don't know. I feel like I've watched a lot of your videos. I listen to your podcast, and I feel like you are just so easy to listen to. Even if I were mad about the Bible, you seem very easy to listen to. I just don't know why. Do you have any idea, or people told you?
Okay, thing number one is what we've been talking about, because I get what it's like to feel weird and on the outside with this, but also really like it and also kind of mad about it. I feel sometimes the same way about Star Wars. I don't know, it's the stupidest analogy ever, but I love it. But also you're stupid and you keep disappointing me, and also maybe it's me. So one, I think there's just
Star Wars series.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, that is so true.
One, I just think there's a degree of empathy. I don't think people who are fussy or frustrated or irritated or have some deep-seated story or whatever about church, I just don't think they're bad. I also don't think we're automatically right. It's complicated. And I mean, anybody who's going through what I'm talking about, they were born with a foot on each side of an earthquake. Remember, like in cartoons when we were kids and an earthquake would happen and some poor sap would always have it go like right through their crotch. Like, right. Oh no, there's a fault right between my legs. But historically, I mean, you're a student of the history of thought. That's you. Mm-hmm. You have a foot on either side of the biggest chasm, the biggest intellectual life of the mind divide in the history of the West. And so do I. So why are we mad at everybody? How it's unprecedented. No one knows how to navigate that. No one knows how to be a Christian with a foot on either side of that. I mean, I don't know. You just try to be patient and give people the benefit of the doubt. I hope that somehow that comes through when we're talking about the Bible. That I don't know. We're not in a fight here. We don't need to act like we're in a fight. Another thing that I hope is helpful for the way we're framing the conversations is you try to do the steel man thing and ratchet down the stakes of being wrong about Bible things. I know that sounds freaky because the Word of God, and it's true, and it's from God, and it's reliable, and the words of life are in there, and you don't want to get it wrong. But Dru, you are getting it wrong. I don't know what you're wrong about. I just know you're wrong. I don't know what I'm wrong about. I just promise you I am. It's like, do you remember the game on Price is Right, where they would give you like an 8-digit number, a 6-digit number, and that's the price of this camper and truck or whatever. And then you got to change them to try to get all of them right. And so you make 5 changes, and it's like, you've still got 3 wrong, but they don't tell you which ones you have wrong. So if you go and mess with it, you might change one you already had right. The thing is, thinking seriously about something this complex and a document this huge, you're just going to be wrong. So I'm trying to normalize, like you just might be wrong for a while. It's okay. Also, there might be other traditions that think things that are right, or they could be wrong. Let's just take the stakes down. So instead of getting to that 1 or 0, plant a flag, I solved God, I solved the Bible thing, let's just sit with it for a while. Let's take the pressure off to finish this podcast and have solved 5 things. Let's just sit with it. So here's what this group thinks. Here's what this group thinks. Here's what this group thinks. Here's the most charitable articulation I can give as to how they got there. Here's what this guy does with this complex passage in Galatians. Here's how this other guy reads it. If you're guy 1, given your background, it makes sense that you might come to this conclusion. If you're guy B, it makes a lot more sense to read it this way. And I've received a lot of positive feedback from people, I think, like you and me, for taking that approach, because it's designed to ratchet down the stakes and designed to give you as the listener language to not panic about hearing ideas you don't think right now.
Yeah. I think that's very prescient, not just about Bible conversation, but about cultural conversation. I found even in the classroom when we're not talking about anything religious, nobody wants to be wrong about anything. And I'm not quite sure exactly why that's so embedded. And I'm talking about in young Gen Zs and below.
Yeah.
Really averse to being, and I play dumb professor where I intentionally say things wrong, or, like, oh, to let them know it's okay. Even I will get things wrong. And man, there's just zero tolerance. And I don't know if it's part of like the fear of being canceled, whatever that even means. It can happen to somebody.
Well, when you and I were young, it would go away. If we were wrong, as soon as the sound wave leaving our mouth dissipated into the environment, you couldn't really even prove we said it. It was gone.
Yeah.
What percentage of your words on a given day don't happen within reasonable distance of a device that could theoretically be on and could theoretically be recording?
Right.
I would guess 0.
Yeah. And so that panic or that anxiety kind of baked into the system. And then you add on to that, well, I come from a religious tradition where there is, the number of students I have that would affirm there is one correct interpretation of a Bible passage, like just one, and the goal is to find the one correct interpretation. I think, okay, well, that's a trickier one because you're getting now to the center of their identity, their family, their community.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think there are any, I don't think any translation is as good as the next, but certainly there are better and there are worse. And let's think about the ones that are better and why they're better, and the ones that are worse and why they're worse. So I can imagine that creating an open space for people to go ahead and be wrong and hold with a loose hand is actually, it's almost like you're thinking about it scientifically. Like, a good working scientist doesn't think that their theory is absolutely correct. They think it's good enough to like plow forward a little bit, and then they test it against reality and see on a good day, they're, seeing what's going on here and then coming back and trying it again with a slight twist.
I've tried using the language of internally cohesive for talking about different expressions of Christianity. So sometimes I go and make videos at churches that aren't like mine,
right,
where I know they think things I don't think. We do not debate, but we go right at the stuff, right at the differences. I just ask, and then they tell me what they think, and we move on to the next thing. The goal is, give me the most beautiful expression of this thing you think is beautiful that isn't my thing you can possibly give me in 40 minutes. That's what we're shooting for. But when I sit down and evaluate those at the desk, after the fact, I'm thinking about, okay, what did I learn there? What did I see? What are they doing? One of the things that I found to be really helpful for myself that I've discovered along the way is just, does that work with itself? And there are groups, I'll pass on saying which ones, but there are groups I've made videos with where my chief complaint isn't, hey, you said things I didn't think before I met you. I don't like that. No. My complaint is your thing doesn't work with itself.
Right.
It's internally incoherent, and I think it's a result of lack of examination. You were born out of a historical pressure, and so you're trying to hold on to a thing that doesn't work with what you're trying to be now, and I don't want to think it. Whereas it's really easy to give Catholics the benefit of the doubt on places where I disagree if I just mentally try to imagine holding 4 or 5 assumptions I don't hold that they do.
Right.
So in terms of internal cohesion, I think there are 5 or 6 threads of historic Christianity where, I see how that all fits together. And then there are a lot of others, and I think those will die out that just don't work within themselves as a set of assumption. I think studying the Bible is the same way. Does this read, is it cohesive with what you're doing with the rest of the text?
Okay, I'm not going to go down that trail. You're tempting me, but not right now.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, can I ask, and maybe you don't know this off the top of your head, but you do several things on your YouTube channel, but what are the most viewed things?
Oh, it's with a few exceptions, it's always going and talking with Christians who don't think what I think.
That's what I thought. I kind of skimmed through it a long time ago and thought like, whoa, those are really well-watched videos.
If I want a video to fail, talk about the Bible on my Bible channel. Like if I just want to guarantee that a video is going to underperform relative to my subscribership and the rest of the channel, just sit down and be like, let's look at the book of Ephesians. Like, I mean, every single person sitting on their toilet scrolling their phone gets to that and just gives it a middle finger and keeps going. I don't want that.
But as soon as they see like the camera walking into an Orthodox church, right? They're
Ooh,
like, golden onion, what's going to happen, right?
look at that guy's beard. Look, they got paintings of peacocks.
Right.
This is going to be a fight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think people like the possibility of. Okay, two kinds of people show up for that. One, I think, people who like the possibility of a fight. But the other kind, I think, are the people who like the possibility of these things actually being compatible and them not having to solve it.
Yeah.
And I'm always looking for language in those conversations to try to find that compatibility. It's why we talk about the creeds a lot in those conversations. They go, okay, look, we're not going to un-Reformation. Like, there's still going to be Protestants. And the charismatics are not going to uncharismatic. There's going to be those. The Italians, they're probably going to stay Catholic.
Most of the time.
They seem really committed. I don't know if you're familiar with Poland, but they seem really into it as well. I think a lot of those Greeks are pretty locked in on Orthodoxy at this point, and a lot of those Egyptian Christians, I bet they're going to stay Copts, and I bet their kids will too. So if we're not just going to try to crush each other in debate and destroy every bit of Christianity that isn't the one winner that eventually emerges, the alternative is we're going to have to find language. We're going to have to do a bit of innovation to find a way to say that Eastern Orthodox guy is a Christian and my convictions about the Bible are true at the same time. Mm-hmm. And I think people who like those videos are picking up what I'm putting down, and they're interested in hunting for that language with me.
I would guess also there's probably a third cadre up. There's probably more than this, but I bet you there's another large sector that is just like, yeah, I don't know anything. I don't understand anything about Eastern Orthodox. I just want to hear what they're about, right? Like, just curious.
Yeah, you're right. I mistakenly broke that down into two parts. I mean, they're educational videos. They're meant for people who want to learn things about things. So
yeah, no, I'm sure that is driving, which is an impulse that I feel is one that you can work with, right? Just like, oh yeah, I don't understand that. I work in I direct this multi-faith Jewish, Hebrew, Jewish, Christian, and Muslim project, and I mean, a lot of it that compels me is just like, yeah, I don't know what Muslims think about that. I'm all ears when they start talking. I'm like, tell me what you guys do with providence, whether you think that's a thing or not. God.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sign up for your thing, but I really want to know.
Yeah,
yeah.
And they as well with Christianity. I mean, we had a long late night conversation about what do Christians do with God's sovereignty, and they were just like, "This is fascinating." The 7 different views that we offered them. So I think there's a lot of that goodwill, especially, and again, I work with 18 to 25-year-olds in college. That's where I spend a lot of my energy, and so I feel like they're much more okay with saying, I'm not trying to believe this. I just want to know what people think over there, right?
Yeah.
And, there was a period when I wasn't a Christian, but I grew up in Oklahoma where there's a few Christians. There's a population density of not just Christians, but weird Christians in Oklahoma, right? And especially in Tulsa or Roberts University.
I just want the people of Oklahoma to know that Dru said that, and I didn't say that.
Hey, I'm one of you. So, and I'm now a weird Christian, but I just remember that energy of that kind of just like, this is the absolute truth and you must believe it or you are going to hell. I mean, that's not, that's not invented language. I don't think it was what everybody was saying, but it certainly, there was some of that energy in the air. And I was just like, oh yeah, not interested, pass. I'll do something else. Yep. Okay, I want to talk about, because you're writing a book on how to understand the whole Bible, how the different parts and books fit together. We're doing this series where we're asking people who popularize Bible understanding, like yourself and the Bible Project and those kinds of people, and also just scholars who just do this for a living at the technical level. And the question really is, well, maybe you can give us an example of one theme, one pattern that you see as obvious, open, and available to anybody who reads the Bible, who sits down and reads it from front to back, something they should see and notice that you would emphasize.
It was always meant to be for everybody.
Oh,
The idea of the global church isn't some theological innovation of the first century AD.
Yeah.
This is everywhere from Genesis 12 forward. It's everywhere, but it's like,
I would
what
say
are they?
Genesis 1 forward, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
What are they? Well, I mean, you're right, but I mean, it becomes smoking gun obvious
Right.
from 12 forward. Come on, man. What do they call the psychological effect where once, like you buy a certain type of minivan and you've never even heard of it, but now you see them everywhere.
Yeah.
The Bader-Meinhof phenomenon. I think that's what they call it, right? And it's just like that. I mean, if you read through the whole Bible and no one's ever just whispered in your ear, hey, look for this stuff about this being for all the nations, and think about what an innovation this was, that there was a religion that wasn't local, regional, and ethnic, but that was always targeted toward a global, all of time, all of humanity view. You're going to see it everywhere.
Right.
Well, then it's like the stinking minivan. Now all of a sudden it's in your head and you're going, how did I miss this? It's everywhere. But I mean, Cleopas and his buddy on the road to Emmaus, they missed it. They knew enough about the Bible to want to show up to see if Jesus came back to life, and they missed it. So how many more things like
Jesus
that?
Explaining it to them, they still didn't quite get it.
Still took a minute. Yeah. Hey, you look like Jesus.
Yeah.
It all worked out in the end. So stuff like that. The theme of the day of the Lord and it not being good or bad, but both and.
Right.
And
right. Good for some.
The day of, yeah. And sometimes the day of the Lord is bad for me. And sometimes the day of the Lord is good for me and my team. That, just the way cheap knockoff religions have their apocalypses written in such a way that we are good, you are bad. The day of the Lord is sort of a phrase that emblemizes how throughout the Bible, the point of view team are the bad guys as often as anything else. They're sympathetic, but
which makes
they're
it
idiots.
Ironic that the Isaiah scroll was so prominent in the Dead Sea community, who clearly had this very black and white, good guys, bad guys mentality, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, the righteous justice, judgment, and virtue of God, him being right in all of his judgments and decisions, that is a double-edged sword, and the day of the Lord summarizes that. So there's that theme. I don't know, we could take up the rest of the time talking about those kind of threads, but that's the stuff I want to kind of pull on and get people to start noticing. I mean, I guess you call that a motif. It's more than a theme, right? It's a thread that runs through the whole thing.
It is like the phrase that some Mark scholars will use of Mark, because Mark always comes off at first glance like a very simple, terse, quick moving story.
That's cute. Yeah.
And then you get into it and you start studying and you're like, wait a second. And there's a whole story about Mark scholarship, how it exploded once people kind of realized what was going on in the text. But they call it, there's a phrase, interwoven tapestry is a phrase used in Mark. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's true of Mark in the whole collection of text. And this, I'm so glad you brought up I would never have expected you to say this, but the issue that it was always for everybody, that the promises of God were always for everybody. I feel like Chicken Little all the time saying this in class, and does that analogy make sense?
Yes. No, I'm just surprised at that.
Yeah. It
is the reality
burned into people. You end up just having to say really provocative things like there is nothing new in the New Testament. And then, prove me wrong.
What's the best swing at that anybody's ever given you?
Yeah. And then you kind of say like, okay, there are a few things like we now know the name of this guy, Jesus of Nazareth, who's going to, be the executor. The idea that God comes as king incarnate would have been kind of, there's certain things. Actually, I think the most, you can correct me if you think something else, but I think the most astonishing thing to a first century Jew would be that the presence of God would move from the temple into individuals.
Yes.
That would
but also, I mean, and maybe, look, you're the expert on this. I read it a lot. I think about it a lot. I got my reads on it. But to me, it seems like there would have been 400 years, everything post Artaxerxes II up until Jesus, there would have been this, really everything post Zerubbabel and the Second Temple dedication, there would have been this nervousness about, is God actually in there? Because last time it was pretty obvious that he was in there. And then finally, somebody empirically tests the thing in the form of Gnaeus Pompey Magnus. He's like, I heard this like rumor that you can't go in there, but I don't think your God's in there. I'm going to go in. Like,
pig in there.
It seems like there was this sense of, I read into it a little bit, this sense of hand-wringing and nervousness that maybe the temple isn't now what the temple was once. And I think about the way that dovetails with the idea of God not living in temples anymore, but in you, in the believer.
I mean, I always hate saying these things on this podcast because then I get emails where they say, well, what do you mean by that? What's your, have you written on this? And so like,
why is that bad, man? That's great.
You can't give a single opinion without people saying like, let's see your article, on this.
Well, okay. Well, that's one of the luxuries of what I do is my answer can just be, no. I don't know. There's lots of people who work on this.
Exactly.
No, I'm not going to fight with you. I have to put out another episode tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot of skepticism towards the temple in general, even Solomon's temple. I think God is very skeptical of, and that the writers of the Scroll of Kings is trying to constantly throw sand in the motor of the temple. But that's
but the chronicler's a little more optimistic, you think?
Yeah, chronicler is always, they can polish a turd like nobody's business. So.
Gosh, you are going to get emailed. You're getting emailed.
No, there's definitely a dispositional difference between Chronicles and the Kings, right? But this, I think, gets to the point that I really wanted to ask you about for this series, which is, okay, how do we justify what we're seeing as a pattern? Because we've all stared at a wooden door and saw Jesus's face in it at some point.
Pareidolia, yeah.
And how do you justify the pattern? And just for yourself, like, how do you make yourself confident that you're seeing something that's actually there? And then, have you ever gone too far, or you read somebody and you're like, nah, you're totally projecting things back into there? I had this argument with Tom Wright about the temple and creation, and I'm just like, Tom, I think you're projecting the temple back into the Eden that's just not there. And I understand why a first century Jew would do that. I just don't understand why an Iron Age Israelite would ever think that. And so we had to go back and forth, and we still disagreed, but we know precisely why we disagreed now. So I wonder what would be some examples like that for you.
The Bible is true in so many different versions of what true means.
Okay.
I mean, so look, I just saw an interview with Tony Gilroy, who made Andor, and he did the Bourne movies.
I'm sorry, I talked over you there. Who?
Tony Gilroy.
You interviewed this guy?
No, I just saw an interview with him where he was talking about his new project is a Disney Plus Star Wars series. I mean, it's pretty grown up. It's not dirty or anything, but it's more like adult targeted, called Andor. And it's about the more gritty themes of practically what would it take to actually overthrow a galactic rebellion, and what would you have to sacrifice if you don't get to keep what you have if you throw a rebellion. It's very thoughtful, disturbingly humanizing of the bad guys. But he was getting interviewed about it, and he's a good interview. But there were themes that people are catching, people like me caught in Andor, where I'm just sure, oh my goodness, look at that. Why did he turn that phrase? This guy's a student of history. That's the Republic. I know where that line's from. And he's like, yeah, it's not. Oh, okay. But somewhere in the ether, it is, though, because Plato said it, and that leaked. And whether other people knew it informed them or not, it did inform them. And so he can say, I didn't know that was from Plato, but it's still from Plato. Even if it's morphed and simulacred a few times over, it's still from Plato. And I think the same thing happens, much more so it happens with the Bible, where because it is so true on so many levels, I mean, Sure. I mean, the garden motif, maybe there are places where the biblical author didn't have that in mind. In the minor prophets or running into the New Testament. Clearly it is in mind at the end of Revelation, but it's not like you're wrong for seeing the connection because it's still true. It's just like dying on that hill doesn't make sense. So for example, I'm working on Galatians right now on my daily Bible podcast. We pick a book of the Bible. It's like drive time radio, try to make it funny and fun, but we take ground 10 minutes a day, 5 days a week on a book of the Bible until we're done. 800 days to get through Matthew. It's going to be, 200 and some on Galatians right now. Well, we just got to the line in Galatians. The line. As for those agitators, I wish they'd go the whole way and emasculate themselves. Okay. So we're going to start off by covering, the positive and the negative approach. What must it mean? What can't it mean?
Right.
Stuff like that. And just make it fun. We don't use fancy language like that. But then I'm going to give myself an extra day because my medium gives me all kinds of grace and leeway to chase down anything. And I did a bonus eunuch episode on it. Like we just did Ezra, Nehemiah, Esther. Well, how were eunuchs thought of in the ancient world, particularly Persia? These were shifty people. The eunuchs are good guys for Esther, but off screen, 10 years after the book of Esther, they got Xerxes killed in his bedroom. I mean, so what is Paul saying by using the word agitator and talking about them emasculating themselves? Well, to me, it's not a crazy leap when writing to a first century audience to imagine that they'd all go like, they're behaving like experts in deception, trickery, cloyingness, and court intrigue here in your Galatian churches. Well, if you're gonna pull eunuch stunts, that kind of court nonsense, why do you make it look that way? Is that the primary meaning of the text? Obviously not. Is it a secondary meaning? Well, I guarantee you I'm not the first person who thought it. So yeah, it is a secondary meaning. Does it mean that? And how hard can I pull on the thread of eunuchs throughout the Bible to make some larger theological point about modern issues or who God has in view or gender in the Bible? Like, I don't know, man. But I have a format that allows me to pull on that thread and then shrug at it and be like, maybe y'all are smart. You can look into it more if you want.
But certainly you have a sniff test there, right? Or what you don't do indicates what you think as well. Like, because lots of moves like that. I read lots of manuscripts for publications, and sometimes they build what I would call a Rube Goldberg argument, where like they'll take that, which I find very interesting, right? Like, eunuchs associated with court deception.
Yeah.
And then that's kind of like the starting point. And because eunuchs are, built for deception, that to me seems like the tenuous foundation to build on.
You mean like using it as an interpretive rubric for the rest of Galatians or Paul's letters?
Yeah, anytime you run into a eunuch. So now, and I really bad arguments would be like, Isaiah 56, promised to eunuchs was actually promising them, even those shifty, deceptive, horrible people are going to have a place in the kingdom or something like that. I mean, I call this bad preaching in hermeneutics classes. I can just start rocking on it. Like, give me a bad premise and I'll just start preaching it.
Well, why does that happen? Why do people do that?
Well, okay, I have a really hot take here that it's going to be wrong. It's going to be partially wrong, like you've said, that somebody can correct me. I call it the Jordan Peterson effect. And nothing wrong with Jordan Peterson in this sense. I only mean it in the sense of when I first encountered Jordan Peterson, it was because young men would bring me his stuff and say, "Hey, have you checked this out?" And I would watch
about the Bible.
No, even before his Bible stuff.
Oh, okay,
all
right.
Psychology and kind of get up, take care of things, be a go-getter.
Make your bed.
Just be
something about a lobster or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay,
you were prone to the Jungian stuff, and they thought it was mind blowing. I'm watching it, going like, "Yeah, I have an undergrad in psychology. I think we studied something like this in the third class or something." But I just didn't find any of it compelling. And I think, coming as a veteran into the normal world, like someone telling me, nobody had to tell me to get up out of bed and go like get a job or anything. Like it just wasn't part of my world.
Well, you're exceptional,
right? Yeah. So I spent a long time trying to figure out what Jordan Peterson, like why people were so entranced with him. And I think it's a mix of things. But one of the things that I saw was you give him any data point and he will fit it into a system that completely makes sense, right? It doesn't matter what it is. You can just say like, the price of lead in a Chinese market, he'll somehow work it into the system. And I may be overstretching my own analysis here, but I feel like when I hear somebody making that move, they are basically they find, you use the word epistemology, theories of knowledge. They find epistemic rest in being able to place that in a series of events that kind of has a domino effect. And if you understand this, then you understand all these things. I'm guilty of this as well. I say this all the time. If you understand this one thing, it opens up lots of other doors in understanding. But I only mean it in the sense that it creates more perplexity and curiosity to go, like nobody's got all the answers. We're all trying to work it out. Okay, what do you think of that? Because I bet you have a better hot take than I do on this.
No, that's a good take. We like things to be in order. Yeah, I didn't see that coming. That's a good answer. I think one of the reasons that weird stuff gets proliferated with Bible is the medium. You got to write something every week. Being a pastor is exhausting and hard, and people's lives are happening. You're also doing relationship for a living. I mean, ask any pastor who's lost his job because he ran afoul of a few relationships. Like, you really think you can just not go to that party?
Right.
You really think you can just not show up for that thing? No, you have to go. All those things have an erosive effect, a cumulative effect if you don't do it. So the way we have pastoring built in our culture is pretty weird. It's a lot of pressure. And I think people in churches imagine that pastors have all week to sit around and work on their sermon. They don't. And it's not because they're lazy. Some of them are probably lazy. They just don't. So at the end of the week, they're scrambling, grabbing resources that work. And also, the only real forward-facing thing they do all week is that Sunday morning thing. And I mean, come on, it's like, this is their job and they don't want to lose it. Also, they want to be faithful to God. So I think there is a certain built-in pressure to feel like, you brought a little razzle-dazzle. Like, hey, turns out there was actually a gate in the wall of Jerusalem that it wasn't impossible for a camel to squeeze through, but it was very inconvenient. Yeah. You can Google it.
Yeah.
And then stuff like that doesn't get vetted. It gets repeated. It makes it into a commentary or something and gets repeated a lot. And right now, I promise you, there is something that you think and something that I think that is that as well, because it's very difficult to lead a fully examined biblical life and always keep track of everything you've heard and you think and why you think it happens. I'm not better than anybody else, but I think there's pressure to perform. I think there's pressure to be a living, walking, breathing resource who knows the Bible better to kind of justify your existence a little bit. I think that's very difficult. I also think it's fun to feel like you found something. You got this whole, everybody's studied this forever, Dru, and everyone's working so hard on it. And this can be the kind of work where you feel like, I'm just going around and digging in a field that's already been dug up. I'm going through the tailings that the old timer miners left behind from their sluicing. There might be, if I could find just one little nugget of gold that they missed in these tailings that I'm tirelessly running again and again and again, that would give me some kind of meaning, some kind of purpose. And back to your earlier question, what are things that philosophically I'm trying to do to get myself out of some of these cycles? Well, here's one. In my Galatians podcast, I included a whole 2-day arc that I knew I had wrong. And I set the whole thing up. I was like, hey, I thought I was really excited to get on the mic. I thought we had a Bible discovery here in, I remember Galatians 4, Galatians 5. I don't remember what it was now. I think I figured something out. I thought I had made a connection. I tracked it all the way down through the Greek, and I got to the very end, and there isn't. And I'm going to take you through the entire failed exercise over the next 2 days. Here we go.
That's fantastic.
So why do that?
Yeah.
To try to model, it's okay to chase it down and have fun. It's also okay to get to the end and admit, the old timers got all the gold here, and I'm going to have to go and and rely on their gold because I didn't get anything more out of the tailings. But I kind of wanted to model to people, like, this was tempting. I would get better numbers if I figured that if what I thought was true turned out to be true, then I can go and make a bunch of videos on YouTube about it. I own that little corner of Galatians. I'm the first one to figure it out. I mean, I'm reading commentaries for this stuff by Calvin, Luther, Chrysostom, Augustine. I mean, you kidding me? And I found this thing?
Right.
That'd be pretty cool. But I didn't, because they're smarter than me and they're better at this. And it's okay that I didn't find it. And further, again, back to your question about how do we make the Bible accessible when you're making Christian stuff and Bible stuff for people? It's really good for me to be wrong in front of people and not fake performative wrong.
Yeah.
Actually wrong. So we have a matrix. My buddy and I have a buddy who edits. He's an evangelical free church pastor, very successful in his church, very successful musician, and yet he edits my podcast. Well, we've been friends for a long time, and it puts another set of eyeballs on my daily insanity to keep me from screwing things up worse than I would otherwise. And we have a matrix, hey, Jeff, if this happens, remove it. Right? If I look smart or knew something off the top of my head, but it doesn't benefit the episode, cut it and let people imagine I looked it up. We're not trying to flex. However, Jeffrey, if I screw up, get a reference wrong, forget where something is, have to do an awkwardly long Bible drill because I really thought that was in Daniel 6, but oh my goodness, that phrase is in Ezekiel. I'm not even in the right book. Guys, I'm an idiot. Leave it. Do not protect me from myself. Let me look stupid. Keep in the part where then I have a laugh about it. And what I'm trying to communicate is, in the age of editing and Googling, we all look so smart. It's a lie. No one knows all the material. We're constantly forgetting it and having to relearn parts of it. It's just the Bible is just a little too much for you to hold in one lifetime. It's just like it's like 90 feet is the perfect distance for a base path to make baseball work. It's like the Bible is just enough to not quite work with one lifetime.
Right.
And to have even the most dedicated mind to get to the end and be like, I still have to depend on other people.
Right.
I still forget things. I still can't hold all of this. And I want people to get it and not be intimidated by it and be okay with that and know that even the so-called experts who they depend on, like, we got to Google stuff. It's okay. We don't know it all.
Even the experts. I mean, whatever I'm expertise in, the Torah, the Pentateuch is where I spend more of my time. But I only know a little shred that I'm interested in, and I rely on all my other and I get my mind blown all the time. I think this what you've identified here as pastors trying to give a nugget, it is pressure to perform. I think that sometimes it's genuinely like I had an aha moment, so I want to recreate that in the pulpit for you. Like,
yeah,
I want you to experience this as well, which is great. I mean, I completely get that. I think professors and teachers all get that kind of excitement.
The joy of discovery is very powerful.
Yeah, and also I think it's something admirable about both showing that you're wrong or showing when you get it wrong. I wish, one thing we wish scientists would do is publish failed experiments, right? It's like the one thing you can't do, but we can do it here in front of.
Or politicians admit that what they said was stupid, but you can't because you will get murdered by your opposition for being wrong.
Exactly.
So when we do this, what we're doing is we're cultivating an intellectual grace environment in church and in the Christian internet. And we've just, like, if we can get that, we can win because then we're able to be wrong and learn from being wrong. And we can say, oh, that made sense. Now it doesn't make sense. Or I thought this week, but I had to take that part back out and put it back on the work table. I'm not sure right now. I may never get back to you on it. It's hard.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's a theological claim, and the theological assumption that is being articulated every time you do that in your classroom. Hopefully every time I do stuff like that on the internet, every time a pastor does that from the pulpit, is the grace of Christ is not just for your swears and your bad behavior or your calamity that you still feel shame about to this day. There must be grace for the life of the mind. There must be grace for your wrongness. And so you have the safety net of the grace of God to engage with this stuff and try and think. And if you choose to do that, you're going to be wrong about things.
Yeah.
And there must be forgiveness for that on the part of God. Awesome. So you're modeling that.
I had never connected these two thoughts, but one thing, when I'm watching, my kids are all young adults, from 19 to 23. And I just think, wow, they have grown up in the most graceless version of American culture that I can imagine, at least in my lifetime. And what you're talking about is actually creating, we always talk about creating gospel places that'll feel inviting, and then that gets really weird in church, what they think will be inviting to people. Just come on in and let's read Revelation to them, But really, it's this approach you're outlining. I think one of my favorite phrases of Jesus before he taught something was, "With what shall I compare the kingdom of God?" Which it admits that there are many things I could say here, and let me see if I can find one that works, and then he goes on to give many different illustrations of what the kingdom of God is like.
Well said.
And then it has this kind of, that there's this you're putting something out there, and some of it's going to grab some people and some of it's going to grab other people. It's just so lacking. And I think I've felt this so much with my students. I can feel their anxieties built on this gracelessness that we were talking about earlier. And then,
and that's why you can't be wrong.
Yeah, you can't be wrong. I was being interviewed by the guy who does Mars Hill Audio. Myers is his last name. I can't remember his first name, but he used to be an NPR producer. So he has this great Mars Hill, and I listened to it for years and years, and I was like, my goodness, everybody sounds like a genius. And now he's going to interview me, and I do not talk like these people, these scholars and these public intellectuals. So he interviews me, and at the end of the interview, I got off and I was just like, oh my goodness, I sounded like me. I was just classic Dru, giving classic Dru kinds of stutterings and ramblings and misdirection.
Great.
Yeah. And then I heard the episode and I realized he cuts everybody up to death and makes you sound awesome. So it was really nice to hear my thoughts so coherently put together. Unfortunately, I was not able to do that. But through his mastery of editing, he was able to do that.
I did a video with a very intelligent, I can't say what it was about or I'm going to give it away, but a very intelligent man on a very niche subject on which he is elite and one of few. And the interview was fine. He's brilliant, but those thoughts were not in order.
Right.
There were lots of buffering words and phrases that don't provide value to the audience. I cut that down about 50% in terms of length. I rearranged some stuff. I did a little moving of heaven and earth with some B-roll, some cutaway shots, some pickup audio. Hey, you didn't answer my question at all. That's all right. I'll go record the question you did answer. We're going to make that work. First, why embarrass your guest just as a principle? You'll get worse guests in the future, and why just be an inhospitable host? But two, his ideas were great. Mm-hmm. He just needed a little bit of editing. Yeah. So the upside is that's more efficient. It's honoring to the person who you helped a little bit in the edit. It's honoring to the audience because you're not burning their time over nothing. But the downside is it creates this illusion of unattainable competence and off-the-cuff knowledge of everything. Right. For people who are already intimidated and a little afraid of being wrong in front of other people. And so my partner, Destin Sandlin, he's got a show called Smarter Every Day on YouTube. He does a great job. We've done a show, better part of a decade, called No Dumb Questions together, where I philosophy and religion a topic while he rocket science is a topic. It's very weird, but we like it. And something I so respect about him is he leaves in all those bumbles. I remember him shooting a video where he was talking about different calibers of bullets and how that relates to the sound barrier and all of this. And he just got the hood of his truck out there and he's taken the bullets to show you this is what a 45 looks like. And, it's like a 9mm. And he's setting them up on there and one of them just falls over in the shot. And you expect him to turn off the camera and run it again and, get back in the zone of acting like himself. Well, no, the hood's slanted and bullets are made of metal and slippery.
Right. That's what happened.
I don't know. It just fell over. They got it. Who cares? Who cares?
Right.
keep going. Not everything has to be polished and look perfect. It didn't waste anyone's time. It doesn't matter if the bullet falls over or doesn't fall over. You're still getting the message across just as quickly. But I noticed he kept leaving stuff like that. And it really affected me and how I do things. And I started thinking, well, why do I try to cover up my stupid stuff when I preach or do Bible things? What is there actually any advantage to anyone, myself included, to holding myself out as the knower of things? My value on the internet, in my relationships, at church, is I am the source of absolute knowledge, and you can count on me. That's a heavy burden. That's a heavy crown to put on your own head. Whereas if instead you make the same pivot that I see my buddy Destin, who I'm referencing, that he made, which is I am the learner of things and I will be a fool on the internet for the sake of you learning. 99% of his audience has no idea that he is willing to be a fool in front of the world for their benefit. And they go and fill the comment section up with, "Oh, good job on that. Oh, yeah, you hit your thing." He did it for you. Right. He left it in there for your benefit. He's serving you. And I think it's just he's not even making Christian videos. He's making science, physics stuff. But it's such a universal principle that if you will be a fool on the internet and not know all the things, when you talk about something where it's really important to get it right, like the Bible, if you will not know things in front of people and learn in real time and they get to watch you learn it, I think that's kind of the ninja move right there, man. You can't fake not knowledge of things till the end of time. But anytime the opportunity is there to not know in front of people and let them see you go from not knowing to knowing, show them. It's only good.
I mean, if I could just offer a little biblical warrant for what you're saying, because I know you know it, but it seems to me that Exodus through Deuteronomy, maybe even Joshua, and then the Gospels are just slow jams of Israel coming to know incorrectly and incorrectly and incorrectly, and then eventually somewhat correctly, and then good enough to stay in the land, kind of. In the Gospels, again, I did my dissertation on Mark's Gospel, and it's like the most negative view of the disciples, purportedly coming from Peter's preaching even, right? So possibly either Mark did him dirty, or this is how Peter himself talked about himself and his colleagues coming to know. So this is, you're not just doing good ad wizardry here or a good marketing technique in YouTube land. You're actually talking about the nature of the biblical literature itself, showing the kind of the tomfoolery on the front burner and then celebrating in increments when they finally see what God is trying to show them.
Do you know, yes, the medium is the message. Do you know why I cannot be perfect and know everything about the Bible in front of you while talking about Jesus and the Bible? Because of Jesus and the Bible.
Right.
Because his grace is sufficient for me. I will never, my chosen route to right standing with God through my own merit and my own effort is knowledge and smartness and saying it smart. If I were going to pick one, right, that'd be my best bet. For a long time, it was Star Fox 64 multiplayer, but I've eclipsed that in my biblical study. Now I'd have to wager it all on that. It's my best card that I have to play, and I'm nowhere close. And the fact that the cross happened and that the Jesus thing is actually real, I like all the academics and all of that, but just boil it down to that the human problem is solved in Christ. That even affects how we talk about that the human problem is solved in Christ. So I'm not the Messiah. I'm not the Bible. I didn't write it. I'm telling you I'm wrong about things. I'm trying to figure out where, but it's kind of up to you, the person listening, to figure out what I'm wrong about, because I don't know yet. Right. And yet somehow I'm still made right with God by the righteousness of Christ imparted to me. How the heck does that happen? The medium is the message.
It's wonderful. All right. Well, Matt Whitman, you run this little show called the 10-Minute Bible Hour. Is it still called that?
Yeah. The podcast is called the 10-Minute Bible Hour. That's a daily podcast available anywhere you get podcasts.
We've recommended it before, and we recommend it again. He goes deep and slow and shows you his method along the way. And thank you very much for your wisdom on this matter.
Yeah, appreciate it. Good conversation, buddy. Thanks for checking in.
You've been listening to the Biblical Mind podcast, exploring the deep structures of Christian scripture. For more, visit the magazine at thebiblicalmind.org. Subscribe to this podcast at all the usual places so you never miss an episode.